What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Collection Commentary. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this Francois Massyn Tanto. This is a front flipper coming from South Africa. It is a handmade custom, and Francois is a part-time knife maker. He may have more recently transitioned to full-time over this past year, if I remember my conversation correctly, but generally a part-time maker. So I've had this knife for quite a while now, at least a few months, and I hadn't really gotten around to making a video on it for any number of reasons. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses, but I'm finally getting around to it, and you know, this knife is interesting. It's kind of a combination of total success and lack thereof. We'll uncover a theme that is likely the result of being a part-time maker. Functionally, the knife is pretty spectacular, but there's some lacking attention to detail, so we'll take a look at that as we move forward. So the first thing that I'm just going to talk about and get right out of the way is the action on this knife. The action is super spectacular, and it's a little bit optional, and I'm going to try to explain what I mean by that to the best of my ability. So typically, I'm not a fan of really light detents. I prefer a snappy detent on pretty much all of my knives, and the reasons that I dislike light detents are, one is that it's usually pretty easy to kind of like throw the blade out of the knife. I don't really have the space to be able to do that here, I don't think, but you know, a lighter detent can result in the blade more easily, unintentionally breaking away from the detent, and then it also often means that you're stuck with a knife that requires essentially perfect hit of the flipper tab to get good deployment, and otherwise you're going to be faced with a knife that doesn't open all the way. An example of this might be like a Todd Begg. Like I have this Todd Begg custom prototype here, and you can see that the detent is very light, right? Like if I just kind of go at it with the same, the same effort that you know, I might go at any other knife. I do get deployment because it's such a friggin' smooth knife, but you can see that the detent is pretty light on that. And so the detent's light on this one as well, but the reason that that doesn't necessarily matter is because of the angle by which you actuate the flipper. So you can see here that the knife is, you know, a front flipper, I would say, by definition. A lot of people might argue that it should be called a top flipper when the flipper tab is up here instead of kind of towards this area. But what it means to be up in this top area is, so you can deploy the knife just by kind of pinching it like this and just tugging on the jimping there. That should get you pretty solid deployment each time. But what you can also do is use this knife kind of like a normal flipper. So if you actually hold the knife back in the hand like this, you know, this is the same position that I would be holding any other flipper, right? So the Brian Nadeau, it kind of rests in these three fingers. I hold it against with my thumb, and then my finger is here to pull the tab. And if I place this in my hand in the same way, you can see that as long as I'm able to reach my finger a little bit further up, you're able to tug on it and get deployment the way that you would with a typical flipper tab. Now, you can maybe hear the difference in that when I do flip the knife like this, it is incredibly quick, incredibly snappy, really that, you know, South African thwack comes to life. And that's because the knife is incredibly smooth. So if you watch here, I'm actually going to let the knife drop shut. Here, we'll just lightly tap it till it gets past that point of gravity. And you can see there that it completely brings itself to a close. And the knife is going to do that pretty consistently. It is super, ultra, mega smooth. Of course, IKBS. And tuned to be super smooth. So when you get this really good leverage by deploying the knife from this position, you get that incredible snappy action. And so if you reference what I said a few moments ago in this video about kind of having an optional, or adjustable would be a better word, an adjustable deployment on this knife, if you're in an office setting, where you perhaps don't want to draw attention to yourself or draw attention to deploying the knife, then you're able to actually, lightly just kind of tug on it and get just a nice light deployment. Or, of course, because it's such an easy detent to break, you can kind of just pinch the swedge here with your nails and pull it out, if that's, how you want to deploy the knife in the moment. And then, of course, when you show up to coffee and hang out with your knife bros, you can grab it like this and, well, I just messed that up, but you can grab it like this and get that super, super loud, snappy South African bang. So that's pretty sweet. So now that we've gone over the action, that's kind of one of the best features of this knife. We can jump into some other aspects of it. So you might be wondering at this point what this material is that's kind of this rosy copper color. And believe it or not, this is actually titanium. And I'm not entirely sure how Francois achieved this finish. Very much looks like a copper or like a copper brass mix with some reds coming through, some peach colors maybe. And the clip is, of course, finished this way as well. And this is actually titanium. Or at least that's how it was listed on African Custom Knives. So the next bit here, this is actually going to be carbon fiber layered with lime green G10. You can kind of see the layers there. And then, of course, it's contoured at a curve to give you this really cool, interesting, kind of bug-like, almost, like a caterpillar or something, this really cool pattern of carbon fiber and G10. And I looked at this knife for a while before I purchased it, and it seemed so unique to me that I always really wanted it. And the thing that really sold me on buying a Massyn knife was his logo. You can see this adorable little owl. My grandmother's favorite animal is the owl. And so I always wanted to own one of Francois' knives so I could say, hey, I know you don't like knives, I know you think they're scary, but look at this cute little owl on this knife that I have. And so I absolutely love that. In terms of the blade shape on this knife, it is fan-friggin-tastic. It has all the features of the general South African custom that we're used to. I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about, but if you whip out a Thorburn, and then you whip out a J.D. Van Deventer, and then, you whip out an A squared knife, and nope, not that one. I'm sure I have other South African customs laying around that also share these features, but you can see a theme here with a sort of, it's kind of a drop point theme, and then what you have is the mirror polished flat that comes up into a swedge, and then a hand rubbed satin finish hollow grind, and then, of course, hand rub satin finish on the swedges as well. Very common, kind of among the South African makers, and really just a pure piece of art, really. I love these blades. They're absolutely fantastic. But what drew me to the Massyn over the others is, of course, the Tanto variant. Now, I know Tanto isn't the first thing that a lot of people leap for, but I'm actually a big fan of Tantos. Most of my cutting tasks are, in the realm of opening boxes, and I've always found that this edge here on a Tanto is best served for something like that, when you want to cut into tape, but you don't necessarily want to use a super sharp piercing point because it will drag too far into the cardboard and you risk piercing the object on the inside. I've always found this little angle here to be quite sufficient for packages. So definitely love that. Definitely love the Tanto look. I think overall the kind of really simple and elegant shaping of the knife is really great. A lot of knives these days have these super, aggressive contouring areas for your fingers and stuff and all that kind of noise. And while that can be appreciated, every once in a while it's nice to have just a nice solid knife. with a handle and a blade. Now, I will say this knife is super prone to slipping up and injuring yourself on the blade here, so no hard work or hard tasks with this one, because this titanium and G10 is ultra slippery, and I'm in a pretty hot room right now. My hand's pretty slippery, and I could easily move right up this knife, so that'd be no good. The backspacer is going to be N690 steel. You can see a cutaway here for a lanyard if you are of that type. Lockup is going to be absolutely great. It's not too far in, as is common with these thinner liner locks from South Africa, but beautiful, no lock stick or anything like that. Really great lockup, so that's going to be great. Now, earlier I talked about kind of a lack of attention to detail, and this knife's grown on me a lot, and I don't have as many gripes with it as I maybe did when it first started in my collection, but the first thing that I'll say is that the clip looks entirely out of place. I don't really have to explain myself on that one. I would have appreciated something where maybe this little area down here was more kind of shaped to the actual shape of the handle or something like that. Something that didn't make it look like it was a complete and total afterthought. That said, the clip does function very well. It could use a little bit more tension. It goes into the pocket very easily with one hand, which is something I always appreciate. But if there was one knife in my collection that I say I might be worried about coming out of my pocket if I sat in a really deep bucket seat, it would probably be this one. So a little bit more tension could have probably gone a long way there. The knife is slightly off-centered as well, but I don't believe that's actually... if you look at it, it's not actually the knife. It's just that the blade is ground slightly off-center, which is actually kind of an issue that I'm noticing on a lot of my South African customs lately. You can see this knife is actually my new A2, or sorry, A squared A6 is ground off-center as well. It could be... I don't know if I'm doing a good job of showing it on video. I apologize. But yeah, hand ground blade that has to be the exact length every time you make it. I can imagine a little bit of asymmetry is borderline necessary when dealing with such a small scale. Anyway, that's, pretty much everything that I have to say about this knife. One other issue that I have with it is that the detent hole is a little bit too big for the actual detent. So I don't know if you can see here, but there is a little bit of wiggle. Not sure if I'm doing a good job of showing it, but it will come out of the detent will wiggle inside the detent relief a little bit before you actually get breaking from deployment, which is never a really great feeling, but it is a bit of a gentleman's folder and everything like that. So I'm going to let that slide on this particular one. But yeah, so thanks so much for watching, guys. Francois Massyn, he is part-time, again, maybe newly full-time, but for the most part, part-time. He doesn't have a ton of options available, especially in the U.S. market, but African Custom Knives has done a great job of convincing him to bring more pieces over stateside. So go ahead and check out African Custom Knives. I've, of course, worked with them on other videos, and I will probably put their little spiel intro somewhere in this video as well. This video was made in association with African Custom Knives. ACK is the leading U.S.-based purveyor of South African handmade cutlery. Head over to AfricanCustomKnives.com for exclusive deals on rare custom knives. So definitely go check them out. I do believe they have a handful of Massyn folders, flippers, regular flippers available from G9, and some of them look really great. I've actually had this knife listed for sale just because I'm in a desperate frenzy to generate funds for something that I have coming up, but I would ultimately want to replace this with, I think, a carbon fiber flipper that they have that I think looks really nice with purple liners. So that's pretty much it, guys. The one last thing that I did want to say, I'm remembering now from talking about lack of finishing or talking about a lack of perfection. All of the edges on this knife, every single edge all the way across, is a perfect 90-degree angle. Makes this knife very sharp and kind of not really great in the hand if you squeeze on it a lot. And it's not crazy. It's nothing that's going to like ruin the experience for you. But I would really appreciate if they would go the extra mile, like an A squared knife or something like that, and just really lightly contour these edges here so that everything feels nice and smooth to the touch. Because this kind of squared off feeling that I've been getting on some Irukas knives and Massyn knives and stuff, it doesn't feel super great. So let's go ahead and fix that, South African makers, and and contour your knives. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Of course, if you'd like to see beautiful pictures of all these amazing knives, you can do so by following me on Instagram at tovarishworks. And if you would like to send me a lovely loaner or just chat me up, you can always send me an email at tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.